Hi, folks. This is Don Meisner with the North Country Fishing Report. You know, I got to tell you that, and I've told you many times, that northern pike are my favorite fish. It's hard for me to say that anymore because I've really fallen in love with catching just about everything. I'm going back to being a kid. When I was a kid, I didn't care what I hooked. And now I'll even fish for shiners. And I say that because now that it's cold and the tributaries, the fish are harder and harder to find. Maybe sometimes the only fish I can find are shiners. So I do enjoy fishing for them. But here's the thing that I want you to be aware of. Back in the 80s in the St. Lawrence River, biologists, DEC officials were starting to become alarmed with the decreasing numbers of northern pike in the St. Lawrence River. And every decade, every year, those numbers seem to be decreasing a bit more. And they've attributed it primarily to the fish not being able to get to their traditional spawning grounds. And there's a number of reasons for that. Remember, change is always happening, and the change in the environment affects the change in the ecosystem. And in this case, a lot of those places the fish used to go to spawn are impassable now. You can't get through them because of cattail growth or because of water depth fluctuations, a whole number of things. It really affects my fishing. And I noticed a couple years ago, there was one of our backwaters to the St. Lawrence that was absolutely fantastic. It was fantastic for big. And when I'm talking about big northerns, I'm talking about fish that are between 10 and maybe even 16, 17, 18 pounds. And these fish are going to be between 36 and up to 40 inches long. Those are big northerns for any area. And they were always present in the St. Lawrence River areas throughout the last century. However, over just the last 2 years, the waters that have been my favorites, and they didn't seem to be heavily fished because these waters weren't accessible to bass boats. So they weren't accessible to people that had big watercraft. You had to have a canoe, a kayak, or pretty much be able to wade to get to these waters. And yet, the northern pike population seems to, just by my observation and the other people that I talk to that fish these same waters, they seem to have decreased tremendously. I don't know what's happened. The only other thing other than spawning fluctuations, diseases are always possible. You know, I may be wrong in telling you this. Maybe there's something that I'm not understanding. But what I am understanding is that I'm not catching these fish anymore. And they are my specialty. I've always felt that I was pretty good at catching northern pike. And I'm using all the same old standby wonderful lures like jigs and plastic swim baits and especially spinner baits and chatterbait type lures, but nothing. So it's something I'm really concerned about. Now, some of the other waters, this isn't the situation because their spawning conditions are different. They don't have to go to the same type of areas to spawn. So some of our inland lakes are the pike haven't seemed to decrease. Black Lake, there's really good populations of northern pike. But again, it's typical of any system. And in another report, I want to delve into this a little bit more and tell you some other reflections. Until next time, folks, this is Don Meisner with the North Country Fishing Report.